The clouds above us carry with them an array of connotations. To be on cloud nine implies the purest form of happiness. To travel by airplane entails being immersed in a sea of white viewed through our cabin windows. To see clouds gathering also suggests putting off having the car washed for another day, or cursing oneself for having left home without an umbrella. Joni Mitchell's song, Both Sides Now, alludes to the role that clouds play in our view of the world. And in the 1930s Hollywood film Bright Eyes, Shirley Temple's orphan character is taken on a plane ride through the clouds, during which her loving godfather informs her that her recently deceased mother is now in heaven. But there is a flip side. Clouds also being a sign of alarm and danger. In the worst case scenario, clouds are a portent of catastrophe. Clouds of war, clouds that precede the arrival of a natural disaster, and clouds that accompany news pertaining to the illness or death of one for whom we care. For our Israelite ancestors in the wilderness, the cloud had its own unique meaning. As we listen to and learn from Parshat Pekudei in the Torah's book of Exodus, the cloud hovering over the newly constructed tabernacle in the wilderness will be a sign of God's presence among the Israelite people during their journey to the Promised Land. By way of the cloud that descends to earth from heavens, God will protect, nurture, instruct, and when necessary, chastise and punish. Our Torah text reads, when Moses finished the work of the tabernacle, the cloud covered it, and God's presence filled it. When the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until such time the cloud did. The Torah scholar Nahum Sarna writes that the book of Exodus, which opened with a tale of misery and oppression, closes on an altogether different note. Israel is assured that day and night, the divine spirit that hovers over her, guiding and controlling her destiny. And Rabbi Ari Kahn adds that for the first time, the people are granted a clear sign that the sin of the golden calf perpetrated earlier at the foot of Mount Sinai, the sin that had temporarily banished the cloud, has been forgiven. Because the cloud expresses the rekindled intimacy between the Jewish people and God. Now that they are once again granted protection and guidance, they can move on, both spiritually and physically, continuing their quest to create a holy society in the Holy Land. For some time now, you and I have encountered our share of clouds and the despair with which they are most frequently associated. Dark moments that continue to test our physical, emotional, and spiritual stamina. The depressing, and as I write, ongoing events that have so harshly impacted upon our world and all who inhabit it. We are infected with divisiveness, the rending of what were once harmonious and peace-loving communities, and the tragic polarization made manifest in forms far worse than any communicable disease imaginable. 2 months ago, on Shabbat, no less, a synagogue came under attack in Colleyville, Texas. Yet another expression of the unceasing anti-Semitic forces bent on directing their mindless hatred towards our Jewish communities. Only by way of the emotional and spiritual strength of Congregation Beth Israel's Rabbi and his congregants was outright disaster averted. 2 years ago this month, and owing to the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, all our lives were thrust into lockdown. No longer were everyday activities as grocery shopping, dining out, riding on public transit, attending school, or going to work deemed safe. Out of the public health regulations placed upon our communities, there grew and continues to grow dissent, pushback against the protocols that culminated with the recent truckers' convoy to Ottawa and its startling misappropriation, I will even say abuse, of the word freedom. Dark clouds grew darker, for what has unfolded in Ottawa so painfully taught us, freedom does not imply the harassment of non-protesting citizens. Freedom does not imply preventing non-protesting citizens, healthcare workers in particular, from traveling to school or jobs. Freedom does not imply injecting young children into a dangerous situation. Freedom does not imply having one's dissent underwritten by groups associated with the terrible events in Washington, D.C. last year. Freedom does not imply alleged gestures of support for the blockade by members of the military and law enforcement. And freedom does not imply the dissemination of anti-Semitic and revisionist historical tropes. The matter of the blockade had been barely resolved when more clouds, even more menacing in nature, emerged over Europe, specifically over the Ukraine. For it is in the Ukraine, by virtue of its current and heartbreaking conflict with Russia, that our understanding of the word freedom acquires a resonance far removed from what had been employed by those whose purpose is to discredit the protocols associated with COVID. The Ukraine is under attack by a senselessly aggressive geographic neighbor that in its quest to subvert the freedom of the Ukraine tyrannically waves off condemnation from the rest of the world. Ukrainian citizens, genuine lovers of freedom, are scrambling for safety in subway tunnels and desperately attempting to leave their country for safety elsewhere. They are enduring a pain and a hardship with which we in Canada cannot even begin to imagine. In 10 days' time, we Jews will welcome the holiday of Purim. We will laugh, dance, sing, eat, enjoy our traditional spiel, while experiencing and learning again, as we must, the story of Esther and the Jews of Shushan. As we continue to be taught, the Jews of Shushan as did all of our ancestors throughout Jewish history, face their dark cloud. For unlike the reassuring cloud of Parshat Pekudei, the cloud in the Megillat Esther threatens to destroy them. Owing, however, to the strength, ingenuity, and will of Esther and Mordecai, those who sought to annihilate the Jews are themselves defeated. The forces of hate are turned back, the cloud is dispersed, the people are rescued, and their freedom to learn, live, work, play, and celebrate their Judaism is restored. Their freedom to lead enriching lives while also enriching the lives of their fellow citizens is affirmed. Purim is a message of freedom and hope. Purim and Judaism in its entirety implies the potential inherent in our Jewish view of the world of overcoming clouds of darkness while embracing, as did our Israelite ancestors, the reassuring presence of the divine. We can make it happen. Stay informed. Talk about the Ukraine with others, and support in any way possible the Ukrainian people and the refugee program that this international crisis has sadly birthed. Now, as always, we must not surrender our understanding of freedom. We must not surrender hope, and we must not surrender ourselves to the clouds. Can you hear our song? May it be God's will.